Well, Cody Highfield from Trinity Fabworks. Thanks for having making the time for me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we've been trying to hook up and do this for a while, and I caught you while you're on vacation of all things. So, why don't you give a quick little brief little intro of who you are, what you do, and what your shop does, and where you're at, and how
Yeah,
many guys you got, and just kind of take it from there.
yeah. My name's Cody. I own Trinity Fabworks. I've been in business since officially, legitimately since 2019. Um, I'm actually a full-time teacher. I teach CAD, math and science at the middle school and high school level. And um, I started this as just a side gig. And then about 3 years ago, I ended up going full-time or part time at my day job. My school let me go part time and full time in business. So um, I'm officially done with school this year in June, and then I'll be going full time there. My
Nice.
wife is also a teacher. We taught at the same school, and then I was actually going to go full time this year, and then we got two little kids, and after we had the second one, we decided to have her stay home full time with the boys, and I chickened out at both of us quitting our job at the same time. So um, I, I needed the extra year to build up a little bit more confidence, and yeah, that's where we're another 2 months out, and I'll be full time focused on one thing finally, which will be good.
Nice. So,
But
tell me what are some of the jobs you do in your shop, and just give us an overview of what you do.
yeah, so that's changed a lot over the past several years. I actually started out all the guys in my family, for the most part, are in trades. My dad's in trades, my uncles, and my dad didn't really. My dad does collision work, and he's done it since he was 14. So he's 40 years into that, and didn't really want me doing that. My parents wanted me to go to school, and I've wanted my own shop since I was 13. I've grew up racing motocross, and I was really big into off road, and um, we go to the sand dunes all the time, and that's what I was like. I'm going to build dune buggies for a living. What a 13-year-old kid knows. Um, and then I ended up going to school to be a teacher. Thought I could. That's kind of where I felt like I should go. And then I thought I could start a shop on the side. It gives you enough time during the summer months and whatnot to do something like that. And I thought my wife's gonna be a teacher also. I'm like, there's all these art festivals around. Maybe I'll just get a plasma table and make a bunch of signs and go travel on the weekends and at least pay for our stay or whatever. And so my workload, back to your question, I got sidetracked, has changed a lot over the past several years. So I started off, I found a plasma table. It was actually an old CNC router. It was a prototype by Bobcat, and it was all dismantled, and it was like 15 minutes away from my house, and I found it on Marketplace. And so I went and grabbed that, and it didn't have any electronics or anything, and I knew nothing about. I couldn't wire an outlet back then, and I bought that and I brought it home, and I was still living at home at the time, uh, and my parents had left to go on vacation, and I bought like a bunch of random electronics online. And I thought I'm going to build this thing while they're gone, and so I set a card table up in their living room, and I worked on that for probably 15, 16 hours a day, for like a week and a half. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had a capacitor blow up in their living room. And I was like, all right, I should probably go to bed at this point. But um, once I built that, once I finally got it going, it took me, I don't know, probably 6 months to actually get a working machine in my free time. And once I built that, that opened up a lot of doors. At that point, all I had was a little Everlast TIG welder, and I think at the time I had a Miller-Matic 130 MIG welder that my dad had used in body work for like 30 years, and it was beat to death. And so I got that plasma table going, and then I started doing repairs for a local concrete pump truck. They run pump trucks, the ones with, they've got like a
Yeah,
140-foot boom on them. That's a rough crowd. But they got my
concrete
foot.
guys really are.
No, no, yeah, yeah. They gave me a lot of experience though, and I've always liked the fab side of things, but I never thought someone would actually give me a shot at it with no experience. And Um, I actually about a year before I graduated college, I went to Pensacola Christian in Florida, and I got a job. They have a weld shop on campus for keeping. They have a ton of staff housing and different buildings and campuses, and I got a job working with them. And it was like a crew of like six guys, and that was the best job I ever had. And I
Nice.
learned a lot there, and I wanted to do that. When I came home, and that's when part of the reason I got that plasma table is I knew I could make parts with it, not just the metal art, but uh, I didn't really know how to get my foot in the door anywhere. And then this pump truck company asked me to make this equipment ramp. And my friend's dad worked there. He was a driver and said, I think my friend's or my son's friend might be able to do that. So they brought me this like 6.5 foot long, 200 pound heavy equipment ramp and asked me if I could build one and said, sure, Um, and I asked them if they wanted me to make it heavier duty than the other one because I figured they'd crush the other one with their dozer or something. And they're like, no, no, just make it the same. I'm like, why wouldn't you want a heavier duty than what you had before? And they said, oh, we didn't break it, we lost it. And that pretty much set the tone for the entire relationship with them because I said, how did you lose this equipment ramp? And they said, we got back from a job site and it was no longer on the trailer. They lost it going down the road. I'm like, I can't imagine hitting one of those at 60 miles an hour in
Oh,
a
man.
Corolla.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So I built one for them, and then it was sketchy stuff every week for them. They kept me busy for a long time. They're actually the reason I ended up forming an LLC because I thought I'm for sure going to get sued over something that they do. Uh, yeah, they were rough on stuff for sure,
Yeah,
but um, it wasn't it's not work I like doing anymore. I like doing it at the time, but it's just not really my thing. But it had its place, getting my feet wet, and
yeah.
then I started making other parts for other people. And during I I'm on a teacher's salary, right? So it's like you're spread a little bit thin, and so I would make my own machines if I could, and so I built my first press brake. I found this was actually a couple hours away. This girl was selling a bunch of structural steel out of her apartment complex garage, and pretty sure her boyfriend was an iron worker, and they were just stealing it. But it was I went and bought probably I don't know 3,500 pounds of heavy structural tube and beam, and I drove. I didn't have a truck at the time, and so I took my dad had an old Buick LeSabre with a tiny hitch on it and a wooden trailer, and I hauled that stuff like 2.5 hours with that. It was sketchy, but I ended up designing that press brake around that. I bought all that steel for $100,
Oh,
and
wow.
so
I
yeah,
was
it
I
was
was gonna say, why'd you drive 2.5 hours to go buy steel? I'm like,
yeah,
for
no, it was
3,500 pound, but for 100, it totally makes sense now.
it was $100 cash and a sketchy drive home, and yeah, I used every piece of that scrap steel on that press brake, and then I got like an old hydraulic cylinder from one of my uncles and like a log splitter valve, and the thing turned out cool. I built like a little NC back gauge for it, and it worked for the time being until I could afford my other press brake until that deal came along. But I started getting more into manufacturing parts. And as things kind of grew. And during COVID, actually, at the beginning of COVID, our local laser was way out. I mean, there was, no one was working, but I don't know if they just cut their hours down or what happened, but the longest lead time that I had heard was 16 weeks. And these
Yeah,
machine shops were like, we can't wait 4 months to get, laser cut parts back. And so they were asking me if I could cut some parts, and a lot of them for weldments and things like that. And looking at the prints, I'm like, air plasma is not what you really want for this. There were a few things I could do, but I knew I wanted to go the route with a laser eventually. But I figured it would be further off in the distance. So instead of burning a bridge and giving them subpar parts from air plasma, I just told them, hey, I can't do this right now, but eventually I'm going to be able to. So keep my contact information. I'll keep yours, and um, my wife and I started praying about it, and we came to terms with it pretty quickly. Actually, we were saving up as much as we could for a house, and um, my wife and I are uh, we both went to a small Christian college that was very affordable, and we're my parents. One of the best things they ever did was send me through that Dave Ramsey course when I was in
Yeah,
college,
Financial Peace
and
University.
yeah, yep, and I've yeah it that's yeah we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we were saving up as much as we could for a house, and then we started praying about it, and it was like a week into it. And this is, mind you, we live a very cheap life. We don't eat out much at all. We drive cheap vehicles, and have a very cheap lifestyle. But we started praying about it, and it was like a week, 2 weeks into it, and I was laying awake at night like normal, and I was like, "Are you awake?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "I feel oddly comfortable with buying this machine." And she said, "I was just going to tell you the same thing." I was like, "All right, well, it must be a sign then." And so I started, I started pursuing that, and ultimately we ended up getting one. And now, fast forward, there's a
Talk
lot of in
about a God
between.
sign, man.
Oh, there has been so many. I'm like, I literally like teaching make like 30 grand a year, and I'm like, I'm gonna spend, four times that on this machine. And it was, and we were gonna have. I bought my press brake, which is not the one I made. The one that I actually bought is a six-axis Amada, and I bought that the day I found out we were gonna have our first kid. And then the laser, I ended up buying like a month. I think I put my deposit down a month or two after he was born. Um, and so it was a
Way to go right
busy
into it.
year. Yeah, yeah, we just dove in head first. But now, most of what I do is support work for machine shops. I do a lot of parts for machine shops. I do some, it's not really contract manufacturing, but I mean, we don't have a set contract, but there's some companies that I work with that I do all their laser cutting and manufacturing for their parts. Most of what I do at this point is laser and press brake work. I do a
Mm,
lot of forming work. And that's kind of my thing. I probably weld, you know, I mean, well less than 5% of the time at this point. But it's a lot of production parts. I just wrapped up a job for a factory in Detroit right before I came down, and that was building some like custom machine enclosures. And so I went in there and designed these enclosures for them with a bunch of different access points and things like that. So that they had these open conveyors going into these shredders and grinders that were for thermoplastics. Their line there, and so I've got a bunch of those I've got to make when I get back now that that prototype's done. And they've tried it out for a few weeks, but
hmm.
yeah, just a I don't know. It's mostly at this point it has shifted a lot. I would say in the last year, my customer base is probably 80% new customers in the last year.
Okay.
Um, and it's getting more to the industrial side of things and less for like individuals and
Mm.
a lot of times before I would do a lot of off-road parts for just guys building their trucks or Jeeps or whatever out of their garage, and I still do once in a while, but
It
it's a
doesn't really pay the
it's
bills much.
no, no, it's a harder sell. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. What do you,
yeah.
what, like, what has been one of the hardest things for you to do in your business while you are still working your full-time job?
I would say the larger projects, usually smaller stuff, I can group together and
Okay.
knock those out pretty quickly. If I've got a couple hundred parts that I'm cutting for this company at a quarter inch, and I
Mhm.
also have, a couple hundred from this company that might be the same material or whatever. Those are easy to knock out one after the other. The long-term projects are harder. I do a little bit of prototype work for some companies. I'm working on one right now for a photo booth company. This will be our third that we've done in the last 2 years. But they make, or they don't. they're getting into making them. But they've been a photo booth company for quite a while, and they do a lot of trade shows. They do a lot of stuff with like Autodesk and the Owens Corning and things like that. They'll go to all their trade shows and set up for them. And actually, the one of the first events that they used the first prototype photo booth for was for Autodesk, which was kind of cool, kind of come
Nice.
full circle. But um, so those take a ton of hours in design
Mhm.
and going over it with the customer and going through, every little aspect of it and every detail. And those are a lot harder to do during the school year when I'm at school. My school has been great, and very flexible with my schedule, and so I teach part time, which everyone always asks, like, oh, like, do you just have a substitute the other days? I'm like, no, we're on a block schedule, and so I would have students like at 2 hours at a time on Monday, and then I would have them 2 hours at a time on Wednesday, and then 1 hour on Friday.
Mm.
And so, like during the school year, I teach Monday, Wednesday, and then I teach the first 3 hours of Friday. So I'm in the shop at 5 a.m. every day. Um, my first class doesn't start until 9, so I usually work on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll work in the shop from 5 until like 8, and then
Mm.
I'll go home and get changed and go speed to school, and try to make it to my first class, and then um, I and then I'll come back afterwards and work. But those long-term projects, if I'm not running my other machines, I mean, it's definitely a bottleneck there.
Mhm.
I mean, it starts to bottleneck when all of my attention has to be on designing this, but I also need to be running these parts for these other companies and when you're dealing with machine shops, I mean, I've got great customers, but they don't want to wait. I mean, there's a reason they came to me is they didn't want to wait, 5, 6 weeks for parts to get back to them.
Yeah.
And so they have an expectation of a pretty fast turnaround time.
Mhm.
And I don't want to leave them hanging. So yeah, I would say the hardest thing with keeping my full-time job, the hardest part about in my business, while I have a full-time job has been uh, trying to juggle some of those bigger jobs while school is in. I usually like to save those like prototype work for if I can,
Summer.
if they can hold off for the summertime. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, laser and press brake work is kind of geared more towards the larger company side of things. Do you feel that with you only doing this part-time, it has been harder to get clients because they kinda want somebody a little bit more reliable who has a full-time fab shop and it's their full-time gig, or has that been an issue for you at all?
Most of them have no idea I have another job. No,
Except for the
yeah,
fact that you don't answer your phone from 8 AM to 2 PM.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, most of them don't have any idea. Some of them do. I mean, but they've been flexible with me. I typically have a pretty quick turnaround time. I do not try to. I don't overschedule myself,
Mhm.
and I try to do my best about being realistic on turnaround time uh, up front. But also, being a smaller shop. That's why, like, if you look at my social media, it will show nothing for a year, and then all of a sudden I'll have a bunch of posts, and then I won't have anything for 6 months. It's not a great way to do it, but I don't post anything on social media
I'm
when I'm
there too.
busy. I wouldn't even have social media if it wasn't for business. That's not. I wouldn't have Instagram if it wasn't for my business. I wouldn't. If Marketplace didn't ruin Craigslist, I wouldn't have Facebook either.
Yeah,
But
true story.
it demolished Craigslist, and I was forced.
Yep.
But I do like it though, because you can kind of tell you're not going to get shot or killed when you go on a deal like you did on Craigslist. It was always just a gamble, but
Yeah, yeah, but it
yeah.
also turns into the wild west of, like, of it's almost brought the whole thing down to a lower level of, I don't I guess there probably was a pretty low level of people, but it's just there's so much stuff to deal with on Facebook Marketplace now
Hmm.
that,
Oh yeah,
that I feel like wasn't around when we had Craigslist, do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. No, Marketplace. I tell you what, that was one of the hardest parts about coming on vacation was trying to put Marketplace down. You go to the other side of the country, all of a sudden your Marketplace has so many different options you haven't seen for the last month on yours at home. There's deals to be had.
Babe, we're driving home. We have to just take this quick detour, like 2 hours out of the way to pick up this whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I bought I bought a new work truck while I was down here, kayak. My dad bought a Suburban.
True story?
We're, oh yeah, this is yeah. Like I literally, yeah. Yeah. Marketplace is in a bad addiction. I've been looking at tools down here. Everything's a different price. Oh, it's like back home. Part of it. I'll send you a picture of my truck that I've had for the last 4 years. I bought so before I started off with my business. I had a Ford Ranger. It's a '94 single cab Ford Ranger.
Nice.
It's yeah, I it hadn't had the oil change in it since 2015. Saw the sticker in that. I'm like, I bought it for $225. And it had brand new tires on it and had brakes done on it. I'm like, all right, sounds good. My wife hated it. She always thought I was going to die in it because you could see the road through the floor. But you know, it's Michigan. That's what all the vehicles look like
That's what
that.
you get, man.
Yeah, and then so I ended up buying this 2500 4 years ago for like $3,900, and it was all rotted out too, but it was bigger, so she thought I was safer in it, you know. But it's that one I haven't been able to use the box on it for like 2 years because it is not what you want to pull up to a you know customer shop in by
Yeah.
any means. It's a bad look for sure, but um, so my dad was down in Florida, and or before I was, and he's like, I actually sent him I was looking at before I go anywhere, I always get like a 2 week head start on my marketplace finds for that area.
Yep.
So I found this truck and I sent it to him because he was looking for a truck, and it's a '06. It's nothing spectacular by any means, but you can't find anything in Michigan that's not rusted out unless it's 2 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and so I he ended up going and looking at it and picking it up for me. But it's an '06, and everything on it is just spotless, which they don't exist like that in Michigan. And
Mm,
so we've done this a couple times in the past. Just buy them and drive them home, and you can either sell them and make some money off of them, or sell whatever you have and keep that one. And
yep.
he did the same thing with an older Suburban. But yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Cool, man. Well, what do you think, what was the thing that really triggered you to be able to go and say, "You know what? I think I can do this on my own, and I'm ready to go full time and quit my job."
So I um I my faith is a huge part of, I mean, everything I do and all the decisions I make.
Mhm.
And I really felt like God had lined things up perfectly for my wife and I to teach at this little school. And um, I've prayed about it for years about just going out on my own and when the timing is right. And realistically, I think I could have done it a couple years ago. But I kept feeling like I was supposed to stay on with school. And then this past year was the first time where I felt like I didn't feel like was necessarily being pulled back
Mhm.
to teaching again. Um, but I also didn't feel like I was being, pulled towards doing, business full time. And I felt like, God gives you the option sometimes. And so I thought that's probably where I was at. Um, and then we decided to have my wife stay home and stay with the boys. And that was the best decision I think we could have made. It's made a huge difference. And
Yeah.
we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year old. And so she's never going to get that time back. And I wanted her to be able to stay home with them for, um, them to have her at home rather than dropping them off with a babysitter or,
Mhm.
daycare every day. And uh, I think, yeah, I think I could have done it a few years ago, but I just felt like I was always being kind of called back into teaching another year. And then this year was I felt I could do either way, and I chickened out and stuck on for one more year. But um, another thing was so all my family lives next to each other. We're about an hour from Detroit, Lansing, and Flint and Ann Arbor. We're kind of in a rural area in between,
Mhm.
and all my family lives next to each other. And my dad and I, um, a few years ago started talking about building a barn, and he's done collision work for 40 years, like I was saying, and he's kind of looking for a retirement career. And I always had to outsource powder coating. I was like, Dad, you just start powder coating. You know, I can give you some work. I can help feed it to you. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And I had some, I was always smaller, and so powder coaters, you get put on the back burner if and you're not one of their huge customers, which I understand. And I would get told, like I started doing commercial signage for different companies and did it some churches, and they would tell me it'd be like a 2 week turnaround time on powder, and it would turn into 8 or 9 weeks, and I just can't. I'm like, I can't keep doing this, and
Yeah.
actually, the last the last straw was when I went to pick up. It was probably close to 400 individual pieces. I redid this entire church. They kind of rebranded everything, and I did two huge signs on the outside, and then a ton on the inside. They were all individually mounted, and that was supposed to be a 2 week turnaround time, I believe, and that one turned into that was the one that was 9 weeks. And I went to pick them up. I had a hard install date set on this Saturday, and I went to pick them up on Friday, and there were less than half of them were done. And he said, "We'll get you the rest next week." I'm like, "No, I got to pick these up tomorrow. I'm literally installing these tomorrow." And at that point, we'd already had a lift arranged and everything, and he's like, "All right, well, I'll take care of them. You can come back tomorrow around lunchtime. They'll be done." Okay. So I went up in the morning, started install about lunchtime. I called them, said, "Yeah, they'll be pulling out of the oven here soon." So I drove out there to pick them up. And as I'm loading them up, I see drips that are about that long hanging off of some of these letters. I asked him, like, and this is a huge shop. Like they're very well known in our area. And he's a nice guy. Does I can't. Yeah. Anyways, there were long drips, and I said, what am I supposed to do with these?" And he said, "You can use some side cutters and cut them off." I was like, "Okay." That's that was all I
Wow.
needed. And so I talked to my dad about it, and he's like, "No, I don't think so. I don't think so." And I'm like, "Listen, I can build you an oven. It won't take that. It won't be that much of an investment up front. We can start it cheap, and if you like it, we can go from there." And he didn't want to do it. And finally, I was on Marketplace of all things again, and I saw this boat pop up, and it was a year old wake boat, and it was $195,000. And it said in the description, the only reason I'm selling it is so I can buy a new one, or buy this next year's model. And I sent that to him. I said, "Who do you think owns this boat?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "That's the guy who powder coats my parts." He's like, "Oh, all right." So he saw there's some money in it, and he got interested. So I built him a little oven. I designed and built this little, like, 3 foot by 3 foot by 5 foot oven, and he started and he loves it. He's been
Nice.
doing it, powder coating, for probably 4 years now, and built a booth for him, and then built a big gas oven for him that works really well, and he's all in it now. He
Nice.
likes it a lot, which is nice because we started talking about building the barn, and we built this barn. It's 48 by 80, and split it down the middle, and I'm on one half and he's on the other. And so anytime I'm done with parts, I just walk him over to him, or drive him over on the high low, and he takes them from there. And so I don't have to drive anywhere. It saves me a ton of time, and I know they're going to be done right and on time. And
Nice.
I can't, I couldn't ask for a faster turnaround time. It's pretty
Right.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's to be able to do things in house, man. Like I tried doing that, and it some things it works for us, some things it doesn't, man.
Mhm.
I've kind of become of the mindset of just let people do what they're good at, and if
Yeah.
your dad's good at it and he likes it, man, that is awesome. That's a
He,
real blessing.
I absolutely hate it. I have no interest in it. He was gone, actually, a couple days before I had to powder coat, or I needed all that panels done for that factory job I was telling you about, and it, I don't know, it was like 5 full sheets of 8 inch 50/52, and so it was a lot of surface area, and I had to powder coat those, and I absolutely hate sanding. I don't like sandblasting. I don't like prep work. I don't like powder coating. I hate all of it. And so
Mm.
he was gone, and I told him after, I did it, and he's like, so is it worth having me do it instead? I'm like, yeah, every penny. I can't stand it. I wouldn't do it if he stopped tomorrow. I would go back. I would outsource to somebody. I can't. You couldn't pay me enough to do that. It's not my thing.
Yeah. So, what do you think has been one of the hardest things for you to learn in business?
That's a good question. I don't, there's probably a lot of answers there.
Okay.
I
I mean,
I
it doesn't have to be just one thing.
yeah,
What
no,
are some
I can tell you what's
of the hardest things?
yeah. So um the business side of things, I mean, the bookwork, and just keeping track of everything. At first, I was horrible at it. I'm fine, now that QuickBooks is linked right to my debit account, it's pretty simple, to keep
Mhm.
track of everything. But realizing the importance of keeping up on that, and not waiting until the end of the year to look at everything and try to add everything up and see where you're at was that was yeah, that was decent. I actually, um, I had for the first couple of years, I ended up having my my grandma helped me out with that, and she was
Nice.
very meticulous, and she'd be like, but she was like, I feel like more on like the Uncle Sam side than mine when it came to taxes, and she'd be like, "Are you sure you're using this much gas just for your business?" I'm like, "Yeah, Grandma, I'm positive. That's trying to make me pay more in taxes than I needed to." Yeah, she'd question, "You sure this purchase was 100% legitimate?" I'm like, "Yep. Nope. Don't worry about it. It's fine." But yeah, and trying, I guess, I don't know. I think a big part was realizing that I don't have to go into every project knowing 100% beforehand exactly every step that I need to take to get it done. I told you I only worked for that weld shop at my school. We did some cool projects in there and some big stuff, but that was great experience. But I haven't I'm not one that's worked in a shop for 15 years before I went out on my own. And
Yeah.
so, when I first started teaching myself to weld, I was in college and I bought a TIG welder. Um, I sold my dirt bike and bought a welder, and I bought.
Yeah,
I didn't
there
have
it is
internet.
right
Like
there.
we, what's yeah. I did. I used to flip. That's how I used to make money. Was I buy and fix and sell four wheelers and dirt bikes and snowmobiles, and that's why Craigslist and Marketplace were
Yeah.
really important to me. And then I ended up selling my dirt bike and buying an Everlast TIG welder, and I didn't have a welding table. I didn't have anything, and my dad did not want me even like doing stuff in the garage because I would always have one of the stalls in the garage taken up with a dirt bike or four wheeler torn apart, and the crankcase split in half, and he's like trying to do other stuff out of there. I'm like, no, this is my spot here. I don't pay the bills, but I'm gonna own this spot. um,
You sure told him.
yeah, oh yeah. I was I'd leave all his tools like outside and they get all rained on and stuff. And now that I have kids, he's like he can't wait to see that happen. Um, but
Same with me, dude. My dad used to come in and he used to I used to build tree forts in the in the backyard and the front yard. And I
oh yeah,
always used to leave his why was I using a ratchet to build a tree fort? I don't know. It was probably a hammer of some sort at the
oh
time.
for sure, it was
But dude,
definitely a hammer.
I always left stuff outside and he'd always be like, "Where's my blah blah blah?" And just like a lot of times he would just immediately go out there and just be like and
Hmm.
just come back in and be and just yell at me for where did I find this outside? I'm like,
Yeah, why has it got
uh
rust all over it?
again
Right.
for the 46th time this year.
Yeah, so I ended up selling that dirt bike and I bought that welder. And I went to the junkyard and I found because I didn't know how you bought steel. Like I had no idea there were places you could just go and they had anything you'd ever want. And so I bought this little like it was like a plate, probably it was probably like 14 or 16 inches by 16 inches. it was painted. I have no idea what it was, but I ground some paint off, and that was my welding table. I put it on a plastic stool, which was so stupid. It was like 16 gauge sign material, you know, and I put it on a plastic stool, and I thought I'm going to teach myself to TIG weld, right? So I bought all of Jody's welding tips and tricks videos. I didn't have internet. We lived in the middle of nowhere, couldn't get internet, and so I bought all of every single DVD that he sold at the time, and I started watching those and teaching myself how to TIG weld. And the first week, I was TIG welding in basketball shorts and like short sleeves, and it's on a plastic stool, one of those stools like that's like 18 inches, 20 inches tall, and
Yeah.
I'm sitting on another one about the same height. So when I'm TIG welding, that arc is like right between my knees, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm wearing basketball shorts. The inside, I've never been burned that bad in my life because I'm sitting down for like 8 hours in a day. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna learn how to do this. This is gonna be awesome, you know. And that like the next day, the insides of my legs were just fried. Like they were bad.
That was a hard lesson to learn.
Oh yeah, but I only had to learn it once.
Yeah.
That taught me right then and there and what not to do for sure. But yeah, going back to your question, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of experience, and so taking that was why that concrete company was a really good, you know, that was a really good way to get my feet wet, because they break everything and they don't have very high standards of anything. So
Mhm.
they were a great one for me to start off with, and you know, be able to learn a lot. And um, one thing I've always been you know, pretty interested in CAD. And I took one CAD class. I've taken one my entire life. I took one my ninth grade year, which was 2009. And pretty much everything else has been, you know, YouTube University. But I just, and a lot of trial and error. But after my first year teaching, I asked my principal if I could teach a CAD class. And he didn't even know what it was. And so I showed him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's you know, that's you can see that being beneficial." And so I've taught that ever since. And ran the robotics program. We started a robotics program at the school, and ran that for 6 or 7 years, and then it just became too much of a time commitment, so I stopped there. But
Mm.
that was all. You know, being able to do CAD was always a big help because I could see before I wasted any money on material what was you know,
If
doable
it's
and
gonna
what really
work,
wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a big help. But trying another, you know, difficult thing would have probably been just trying to get by with the tools and resources that I had at the time.
Mm.
And that's why I would always like, I didn't have a belt sander, so I built one. I took an old treadmill I found for free, tore it all apart, had a variable speed DC motor, which is not what you want. It's, you know, it's all open. They fry themselves in like, you know, probably 5 hours of grinding dust being on them. But I built one of those, you know, because I needed one at the time. And then, you know, the press brake, plasma table. I built my second plasma table, and just trying to come up with tools that I needed to get the job done. I never had room for a forklift. I was in a 22 by 22 foot garage for 5 or 6 years. And so loading quarter-inch plate on a 4x8 plasma table where you can't even walk through the garage is pretty difficult. So,
Sure.
um, trying to get stuff figured out like that, I guess.
Okay.
Get jobs done that I didn't have the equipment to
Mm.
do them with, or the proper equipment. That was probably a pretty difficult thing, but
Yeah, I could totally
taught me a
see
lot.
that. Now, speaking of equipment, like, what is your, you mentioned Dave Ramsey, and paying for cash on things. What is
Mhm.
your stance on, financing things versus paying cash?
So I've never had a credit card in my life, and I've never taken a loan on anything. Neither has my wife, and that's not because I think that's the only way to do it by any means. I know for 100. I mean, I'm 100% certain that has stunted my growth on my business.
Mm,
And my whole view on it, I guess, is really my family and my faith mean more to me than anything else. And I looking at all the, welding forums and pages, there's a lot of divorced, unhappy people, and it's, it's kind of the name of the game almost. And um, some of them might be happier afterwards. I don't know, but I don't want. I I know myself, and I think I that would push me over the edge if I had a mountain of debt,
Mhm.
and um, I don't want to. I don't want that to have a negative impact on my family. I don't want anything that I do in business. I've told my wife. Actually, that's why I named my business Trinity Fabworks. Kind of has two-part meaning. The one, Trinity is,
Oh, yeah.
with my faith, and then um, I've always wanted to remind myself that my business belongs to myself, to God, and to my wife, and
Mhm.
to try to keep my priorities there. And I've told her since I started, if it ever becomes a problem where you think I'm prioritizing it more than our family, or if it's, you're ever getting to a breaking point, um, I'll shut it down if or whenever you tell me.
Yeah.
If it's getting to a point where that's going to break our family apart, she pretty much holds the keys to lock it all down and say we're all done with it.
So, has she ever said that? Because I know I wrestle with that too.
I'm I'm in Florida right now, so that's that might be a good indicator of why I'm on vacation. um, things were yeah, things have been super busy really since May. So that building that I said we were going to build, that barn, that took us. It We did a lot of the work ourselves. Our cousins do construction, and so they helped frame it all. And then we did a lot of the. My dad and I did a lot of the work. So on top of trying to keep my job, keep my family, keep my business running, we were also trying to build that building and finish it out. And
Mhm.
it took forever. But the biggest hang up was that our power company took 519 days to install one pole and one transformer, and that killed me. I had that laser sitting there for a year and a half before I could ever turn it on.
Dang.
And yeah, so you have a 3-year warranty on that machine. So I was halfway through it the first time I kicked it on. That was a bummer, but thank the Lord, it's all worked out all right so far. But yeah, it's been a long couple of years, and throwing a couple new kids in the mix, and
Yeah.
um, we were both getting to a point a couple of months ago where I'm like, I was just drained,
Mhm.
and I ended up just saying, we're gonna go down to Florida. I think our family needs it. It came kind of at a breaking point. My 3-year-old had a little block that they've got these blocks with faces on. Some are smiling, then he's got one that frowns. And he brought it up to me and he said, Daddy, why is he crying? I said, I don't know. Why do you think he's crying? He said, probably because his daddy's at work. And I thought, all right, that's,
Dang.
yeah, that pretty much cut right through me. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be, I mean, going back to the finance question, I have no interest in being an absent father or an
Mhm.
absent husband. Um, my business is not to try to get rich by any means. I just want enough to provide for my family and let my wife stay home and take care of the kids.
Yeah.
And anything on top of that is a bonus. And I don't want to put myself into a spot where I can't just walk away if I wanted to. And
Mhm.
I've talked with enough guys that are so, stressed over, when you have $10,000 a month in machine payments and all this, I would rather just stay small, I think, and make a decent living and see my family. I don't want to I don't want to jeopardize that at all, and I could see myself very easily getting wrapped up in that. Um, that's what I'm kind of trying to avoid.
Yeah.
But,
I think that's an issue for all of us, really. Like I've come to that realization a few times, where the work just kind of and you justify it that it's for a family and this and that, and it just comes to a breaking point. Or like, all right, well, what's really more important? Like,
Mhm.
is it really going to work, or is it like the fact that, your kids are okay with you being gone all the time because 'cause they're just used to it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's been that's been a struggle I've had, like, a lot in my business
How old are
journey.
your kids?
4, 7, and 16.
Okay. All
So,
right.
especially the younger ones. So Hunter is the oldest. He goes to school. He goes to public school. Our 2 little ones are homeschooled, and it's awesome because I've realized in the past probably year or so that I really value my freedom, my time freedom, and,
Hmm.
not freedom, my time flexibility, because I consistently do over 40 hours a week. I'm probably, I would say I'm probably 45 hours a week
Okay.
of like actual work time, but I can break that up. I can leave early some days to go to taekwondo and see my kids, and I can take a Friday off and work a Saturday or vice versa. And you know, it's been really good for me to realize that family comes first.
Hmm.
Like I'm a Christian too, and that's been like a big thing for me is especially with trusting God with the business side
Hmm.
of things. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm a hard driver. I'm like, I've for so long, I've, when I pray for big signs. I'm like, you know
Uh-huh.
what? You got to shut some doors and you got to open some doors wide because I'm not real good at this subtle stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, that's been a big, a big thing for me too.
Okay. Yeah. That's I when and in saying, seeing signs from God and things like that, I try to live by that, but I get so wrapped up in it myself, and I'm like, God has a way of humbling me real fast
Hmm.
when as soon as I think that I've got it, like, oh, I got this, I can do this, I got this figured out.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, I can't do something that I've been able to do with my eyes closed for the last 5 years. It's like I can't, I just screw up at every turn. I'm like, okay, all right, need to take a step back and see who's really in charge here.
Yeah.
But seeing how God has worked things out in my business has been honestly, it's grown my faith a lot more. Just even like so that 4x4 plasma table that I first built, I ended up building during COVID. I built a 4x8 right at the beginning, and I sold my 4x4. And at the time, I had that home built, press brake that I was making parts on. And this guy that wanted that 4x4 plasma table uh, was really interested. He came out and looked at it, and he really wanted it. And but he was, I don't know, 500 or 600 bucks short. Um, and I said, all right, well, you got anything to trade, and I'm always up for a good trade.
Marketplace,
And
baby.
oh yeah, yeah. And he's like, well, I've got some, some like press tooling. I'm like, whatever. I didn't even see it. I said, yeah, that's fine. Just bring it. I probably would have taken the cash that he had anyway, the 500 less that he had offered anyway. And so he comes and shows up. He opens the back hatch of his SUV, and there's like probably 600 plus pounds at least of press brake tooling back there. I'm like, oh, cool, and there's different. I don't know if you know anything about press brakes, but there's really like three different types of tooling. There's American style, there's European style, and there's wheelless style tooling.
Mhm.
And my homemade one took American style tooling, and this was all European. I'm like, okay, well, I can't use this anyways. Maybe I can throw it on eBay or something. And we're unloading just crate after crate of this stuff. And press brake tooling is not cheap,
Yeah.
especially like precision ground, European or wheeler tooling, or any precision ground tooling is. You can get some cheap American style stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty pricey. And so we unloaded all, and then there's a bunch of stuff in it. I didn't even know what it was. And so we unload it. He gets the plasma table. I don't think anything of it. I literally shoved those underneath my plasma table and left them there for like a solid year. Um, and then I started praying about finding a press brake, and um, I was looking for one on Marketplace for a long time, and then I finally found one out in New York that a company just got brand new machines, and they were selling their old. They had three old machines they were selling, so I reached out, and I ended up buying that. I had my buddy go out and truck it back for me, and I got that, and I brought it in and got it set in my garage, which buying something that big to try to squeeze into my two-car garage was a little sketchy because
Mhm.
it came all the way from New York, and then I had to have a rotator come and take it off the trailer and set it on the ground. I put it on 3/4 inch round stock, and shoved it through the garage door with a front end loader.
Yeah.
And it literally, I had to take the controller off. The main beam on that press brake had about a half-inch clearance between the top of my garage and the top of the press. And so it just squeaked through and got it in there, got it set up, and then I walked over to those boxes, and it was everything for that specific machine. So it
Wow.
wasn't just like the European tools, like all the tooling I needed. It was I had all of the like European style press brakes that take European style tooling. They have tool holders that you like your punch snaps into, and
Mhm.
then you either turn. Some have a handle, some have a lever, um, or like a little knob. You turn them, and it locks down on it. And the press brake came with the older style, and this one had all of the like upgraded tool holders for that specific machine, the exact number it needed. I mean, they were for that specific machine. They were all Amada style tooling, or I
Nice.
mean, all Amada tooling. And I was like, that's a cool way that it's worked out. But stuff like that has happened, time and time again. My business now is so dependent on a forklift. I could not operate a day without one.
Mm.
And I had my forklift go down probably 4 months ago. And that was another one. I traded a guy labor for, I made some parts for his semi, and traded him labor for this old Yale forklift. And it worked fine. The clutch had been going out in it since I got it. And um, finally, the clutch, I had just gotten a new material rack in. So I had all my pallets of material spread everywhere. And that clutch finally gave out completely. Um, and when that was on a Thursday, and we just started a new small group. That was going to be the first night small group at our church, and I ended up closing everything down, and we went to that small group, and our church has grown a lot in the last couple of years, and I got in that small group, and I didn't know many people, and at the end they were asking if anyone had prayer requests, and I said, this seems kind of stupid. I said, but my forklift went down today, and I said I can't do anything without it, and I had a job. It was actually for General Motors, and I had just gotten a PO on that like the day before, and it had to have a quick. Part of me getting that purchase order was that I could give a quick turnaround time, and I there was no way I could do it without a forklift. So I was kind of panicking, and so I said, yeah, so I need a forklift. This older guy from across the room, who I at that time had never seen before, he says, "Is it a Yale?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I've got like 10 of them in the factory in the corner." He said, "You can come take any parts off of them that you want." It's like, no kidding. So I talked I talked to him afterwards, and I told him what happened. He goes, "Oh, is it a manual clutch?" And I said, "No." Or I said, "Yeah, it is." He goes, "Oh, I don't have any that old." He said, "But we might be able to make a deal on some of the forklifts we have in the factory." I said, "Okay." So I go up there a couple days later and meet with him. They're all like, they were all 2017 Yales that they were getting rid of, and they were getting rid of them because it's a large factory, and they ended up going with a leasing company so that they don't have to keep up the maintenance themselves.
Mhm.
And so they were selling all their old forklifts. So I ended up buying two of these 6,000 pound Yale forklifts. They've got I forget what the mass height is, but they both have side shift. They're as nice as can be, the nicest thing I own. And I got both of them together combined for $1,500. That's and I this scrap weight on them, you could scrap them for
Yeah,
over $1,000 a piece.
yeah.
And yeah, and then so I'm like, all right, now I got to figure out how to haul these back because they're like 12,000 pounds a piece or whatever. And um, so I call the guys that I usually have haul stuff for me, and one was out of town, the other one was on his way. I don't remember. He couldn't do it. So he says, "Well, I tell you what," he said, "there's a guy that hauls dumpsters for us once a week." And he said, "He's probably out, I don't know if he's already been here today or not. He only comes out on Tuesdays." And that was a Tuesday. So he calls him and he says, "Hey, are you at the plant?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, come around here when you're done." So he did. He gets out of the truck, and I've known him for like 20 years. And he ended up, it was just a crazy. I could not have set that up. I could not have planned that, and he ended up, he's like, "I tell you what," he said, "I've got to haul this dumpster back to uh, my hometown. This is over an hour away from my house. And he said, I've got to haul that dumpster back to someone who's like 10 minutes from your house. He said, let's just throw this forklift in the dumpster and I'll haul it in the dumpster back to your shop. And so we hauled one back that day, and I was using it the very next day to work. So I didn't miss any time at all. I was like, only God could do that, you know.
Right? That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's awesome, man. Well, so how do you find those jobs with the larger companies that you like General Motors and the companies that you deal with? How do you
So
advertise?
that General Motors job, um, I get I end up doing some pretty cool like stuff for larger companies, but it's through other shops. So
Okay.
that General Motors job was they're literally out. I mean, there are several machine shops that will just outsource the entire job to me because they don't do any laser press brake work, but they have the connections. They've done work with them for 30 years, you know, and so they'll get an RFQ that comes in, and normally they'd have to turn that down, but they now that they have someone that can do quick turnaround on parts for them for laser and forming. They'll usually shoot it over my way, and then they'll just mark it up 10 or 20%, whatever the markup is, depending on the size of the job, to make it worth their time. And they'll throw a bid in on it and let me know if we get it or not. So I haven't done any work like directly for these
Okay.
larger companies. It's mostly just other machine shops in the area that I'll do work for. That will, they'll have something come in and they'll have a whole, packet or a whole package of parts, and they'll do all the parts that need machined, but there might be all these parts, all these brackets that need made for that same package. And
Mhm.
so they'll outsource that to me, put a price on the whole job and send it out and see if it gets approval or not.
So how do you advertise to get how do you acquire other customers? Like you say that machine shop. Like
Mhm.
do you advertise online? Is it
But
word
I've
of
never
mouth?
advertised once. It's
Really?
it's all been yeah, it's all been word of mouth.
Okay.
And like I was saying, like with the social media stuff, I'm horrible. And the only time I'll put stuff on usually is if I'm trying to fill some spots, if there's any gaps in my schedule coming up.
Mhm.
Um, and hopefully that's hoping to change that here in the next couple months. But the reason I do that is because I don't want to get buried in work and not be able to fulfill these jobs at a decent lead time that these companies need their parts back in. I don't.
Mhm.
I would rather. I would rather not have the RFQs come through, um, and rather than get them and disappoint them because it's taken longer,
Yeah.
than expected. And that's another thing I really think. Uh, I, God has worked out the timing in all of this because even when I said I ran the robotics program at my school, that was typically from January until the beginning of January until the end of March or middle of April. And in that time frame, I would have like 700 hours wrapped up into it. It was a huge time commitment. And so my business, every year that I ran robotics, my business would basically shut down from January until the end of March. And it's not because I would tell people I'm not taking jobs. They would disappear. And I would get a little like here and there that I had time to do and things like that. But that was what made me, think that it's just as much of a blessing to get jobs when you have the time to do them as it is to not get jobs when you don't have the time to do them.
Mhm.
And so as far as like the advertising, I haven't done any. The only thing I do is post stuff on social media. I might advertise once I'm full time. I hesitate to do that because I know a lot of these companies, manufacturing's pretty big in our area, and I know they're going to give you one or two chances, and then they're writing you off, right? And so I don't want them to give me a chance at a time where I say, hey, sorry, it's going to be 12 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever, something that's not going to fit their schedule.
Yeah.
I want to take it slowly and try to say, okay, I'm going to try to make contact with these couple companies, and rather than sending out emails to 100 of them and getting 50 emails back, and I can't by myself, I can't support that. So
Sure.
um, yeah, I've actually got a guy. He's actually one of my students. He's going to school for welding and fabrication, and he started working with me a little while ago, and I'm hoping to bring him on full time this summer
Okay.
and from here on out. So he's been doing a really good job, and I that really opened my eyes to um, how much more you can actually get done and accomplish when you actually delegate some work. And um, that that was something I wish I would have realized a long time ago. But
Okay.
um, he's been a huge help, and um, that's I think that's kind of buying back my time.
Mhm.
Um, where I can set him up on my laser or on my press brake, and if I program it, he's not to the point yet where he can program it and run jobs himself. Um, we're working on that, but uh, I can if I program the job and I've got the laser running, I don't like to leave the laser unattended because if you crash it and it doesn't realize that you crashed it and it just keeps destroying itself for an hour and a
Yeah.
half while you're working on your computer. I don't I don't have the money to fix that. So um, I either have to sit there or he can sit there and watch parts and take him out of the nest and or take him and out of the sheet and throw the skeletons in the scrap pile and stack all the parts up and whatnot. So that's been a big help, and I'm looking forward to doing that some more, bringing him on full time and hopefully training him so that he can start learning some of that. And
Nice.
um, yeah,
So you said your shop is like basically at your house, correct?
yeah. It's
So
my commute is I usually just I could walk there if I wanted to or take a side by side.
nice. So what does your work-life balance look like then with your 2 kids at home and, working part-time and then also, working at your school job part-time and then also Trinity Fab Works? Like, walk me through what that looks like and what are some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough, and that was the biggest motivating factor for me to go full time with just my business because right now I work full time with my business right now. Um, and I'm just having this second job basically of teaching, and I love my teaching job. My school, my students it's been a great place for me to work. Um, And my work life balance though has definitely suffered from that. Being trying to juggle all of them,
Mhm,
and I feel like there's not much of a balance. But um, I noticed that I can just wake up earlier, and if I'm getting a few hours less sleep, they don't know that I'm not there when they're sleeping.
mhm,
And my wife's asleep, the kids are asleep, and so I started waking up earlier and earlier. Um, and that's been a way that I can get a lot more done. I feel like if I usually am in the shop around 5, and if I can work, if say I work 12 hours, say I work from 5 to 5, I'll get more done in those first 3 hours when people are still asleep, the world hasn't woken up yet, than if I worked from 8 to 8. It's still a 12-hour day. I'm not going to get anywhere near the amount of work done if I work, from 8 to 8 than if I do from 5 to 5, just because I'm not answering a bunch of emails. I'm not answering phone calls during those first few hours.
mhm,
And I can really just if I get up and get focused, I feel like I'm a creature of momentum. If I can just keep my nose to the grindstone and keep working until the work is done, then I can let it go. But if I keep getting interrupted and things like that, and then it will take me way longer just to get back on track and get going again.
mm,
Uh, but the my family, I try to come. I like I said, I'll start in the morning at around 5, and then those days that I have school, I'll come home. They're usually awake before I leave for school, so I'll talk to them for a few minutes while I'm getting ready, and then I'll go to school. Then I'll come back home, and I usually get changed and talk with them and play with the kids for a few minutes if they're not napping when I come home, and then I'll head back to the shop, and then I'll come home for dinner. Um, my wife is as patient as can be because there's so many times where she's like, "All right, dinner's gonna be ready at 5:30," and I come home at 7, and she's, "Okay, I guess we'll warm it up," you know. And, um,
Yeah.
that's honestly just having seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that June 5th is my last day. Trying to juggle all of it has been a huge relief for all of
I
us, just
bet.
because we know there's a time limit on it, and
Mhm.
um, we're gonna push through until that point. But it's been a hectic year, for sure.
Yeah, I bet.
And yeah, she's been very patient, but that is, I try to. I ended up getting. I'd always done business with my personal phone, and so it was that one you could never leave. And
Mm.
this past year, I bought a phone just for the shop, and I accidentally left that at home when we came on vacation. That one, I meant to bring that with me so I could check it once a day, but I left that at home on accident. Um, but trying to leave work at work, and when I come home, and I used to always bring my computer, like I'd bring my laptop home and work on CAD or CAM or whatever, answer emails in the evenings, and I try not to anymore. I still might answer the occasional email, but
Mhm.
I don't work on design work or anything at home anymore.
Good.
It's all done in the shop, and it doesn't come home with me. But another nice thing is, like, my wife and my kids, they'll come walk down to the shop all the time, and so they'll come see me while I'm working, and my kid will come in and say hi, and run around and try to jump on the forklift and do crazy things. And um, he, he he got me in trouble actually about a month ago because I put a jib crane up, and I took him down to the shop one night while my wife was getting our other kid to bed, and I have a vacuum lifter for lifting sheet metal and plates, and
Yeah.
loading the laser, and I put him on it and swung him around and let him swing from it. And that was the first thing he told mom when he came home, was that dad made let me swing on the crane. Yeah, yeah, but
It's funny,
yeah.
when COVID first happened and all the kids were were doing school at home, um, my son, they were already used to doing some school online, but transitioning in over to it, I took him to the shop, and we have, like, a metal folding chair. Well, it's a metal chair, it's not folding, just to do different. When he was on a Zoom call, I actually welded up some angle iron to the back of it and to the front of it, and lifted him up over top of the plasma table, and he would just hang there, and he would push from one side and then swing himself across. Meanwhile, he's on a Zoom call the entire time and just push himself over this way, like.
Uh, there's plenty of stuff to keep you entertained.
Oh my
That's for
gosh,
sure.
and the spider crate,
Yeah.
man. The kids love to swing from this, like, they
Oh,
hold
I
on to
bet.
that ball and you just swing them a little bit and stop all of a sudden. It's like a ride, man. They love it.
Yeah, yeah. If well, you wouldn't be getting your money's worth if you weren't using it for
And
that way.
and if OSHA is listening, this is all hypothetical. I've never done this before.
And my business insurance, it doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
my insurance lady's listening right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're gonna get that denial policy tomorrow.
So, if you were to do it all over again,
Hmm.
as far as your business goes, what would you change?
I would I I would probably ask for some help along the way before taking so long. I mean, I really
Help with
feel
what?
like get an extra set of hands. I
Okay,
like
okay.
having that guy come in. Yeah. So that guy, he was actually one of my students. I was saying he was one of my CAD students. Really great kid. And I probably would have delegated some stuff a while ago. And it's not because I feel like I'm too good to be cleaning parts or anything like that. I still do everything. But being able to buy back some of my time, I think it really didn't click with me until recently, how important that is to be able to do, to keep things running and keep things moving smoothly. Where if I can pay him to come in and uh, sit there and watch the machine, or run production parts on the press brake, or clean parts, palletize parts, whatever. Then I can be working on quoting jobs and ordering material and everything on the business end. Even just program at some point, getting someone that can program the jobs, and then I can just keep focusing more on reaching out to new customers at that point,
Mhm.
when it comes time to grow rather than just to sustain where I'm at. I think that'll help a lot. But I waited a long time to get anyone in there to help me. And with me taking the time, yeah, I mean that way I'm making the money from it and I'm putting all that money back in. To date, I have not paid myself a penny out of my business. Everything has gone right back in. And uh being able, I was like, always afraid, hey, if I pay someone to clean these parts or to wash the machine, that's money that I'm not going to be able to, put back into it. But realizing that that's not really how it works, being able to pay someone to do that, you're going to really make more hourly than you would doing it yourself, because now
Mhm.
you're delegating that task that maybe doesn't need your attention, and now I can go back into programming and setting up jobs and coordinating things that um, I really need my eyes on, as opposed to something like that, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
bring someone in earlier. Yeah.
Cool.
What about you? What would you change?
What would I change? Um, I would have started I would have implemented standard operating procedure. I would have hired a business coach about,
Okay.
uh, 6 years before I did. If
All
I
right, that's fair.
if I were to do it again, I would probably hire a business coach, after I hired my 1st or 2nd guy, and I
Okay.
think that would have helped me a lot with building standard operating procedures
Hmm.
and having better expectations, communicating my expectations better to my guys,
Okay.
and therefore being able to hold them accountable more, because I always err on the side of, like, almost like being the nice guy rather
Hmm.
because, like, "Well, why didn't you do it this way? We talked about it." "Well, I don't remember us talking about that." "Well, I clearly remember the conversation, but guess what? It is my duty as the owner and the project manager to write that down somewhere for you and hold you accountable to this piece of paper right here where it says it, you know?"
Hmm.
So, I think I did a lot of, and I would probably not have hired so much on the personality, and then tried to train them for the skill, because we did a lot of that, and, personality is very important in a small shop. It really is. Um, and skill is also really important in the shop, but they also need to want it. We've hired a lot of people who said that they wanted it, and when it came down to it, they didn't want to put in what it took to reach the
Hmm.
goals that they said they wanted and the goals that we had for them, and we spent a lot of time trying to raise them up to a level that they honestly just didn't wanna get to. So,
Okay.
I would probably hire and fire a lot quicker. Um,
Okay.
but
How have
in order
you?
to do that, you need a clear, defined, uh, job description for them to
Mhm.
so that you're firing on the basis of, like, black and white it's written in black and white rather than your feelings, because I don't feel like you're putting in enough. Well, if you have it written out and say, "This is your job duty, you are not doing that. This is your stretch goal, you are not accomplishing that." It's a lot
Mhm.
easier to fire when it's black and white in their face, and not in their face, but on paper that says, These are your roles and responsibilities. This is what we expect. You are not owning up to it. It is not fair to everybody else in the company that you are not owning up to that. It is not fair to us that you're not owning up to that. And you either need to pursue it to the point where you get better, or you just can't be a part of our team anymore, you know?
Okay. How has that changed how you interview for potential employees on
Yes.
what you're, yeah, okay.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am uh a little bit more harsh. So we've gone through a lot of people, not a lot of people. We haven't gone through a lot of people. Um I've gone through enough people, and I've lost so much money on hiring the wrong people and not and them not working out, that I am okay with it being small until we
Mhm.
find the right person.
Right.
And, it's one of those things, like, that right person when when they come along, um, and, we just haven't found another one of those right people yet. And you know
Hmm.
what? I would rather not hire them than hire the wrong person, out of desperation, and then be in the same spot that I have been before, because
Hmm.
it's just cheaper to not. It
Yeah.
really is. It's,
Uh-huh.
because it's not only their salary that you're paying them, it's the benefits, it's your time, it's the lost potential of what they could be making for the business and moving the business forward in their training time and their
Mhm.
I say training time as in, like, I consider time that they're not hitting proper hours on a job, training time. If, if it is legit, like, a little bit over their head, I can consider them they're not hitting hours, calling it training time. Um, but, you know, I'm also not here to just uh, break even, you know?
Right.
And I feel like we've done a lot of breaking even over the years for
At least on
people.
your taxes.
Yeah, well, just overall, I think, JMW has had so much wasted potential
Hmm.
in where we could be and what we could have done, because I didn't lead my team properly in the beginning. And,
Okay.
really, it does come down to me. It's my leadership that, uh, kind of helped fail them, when it came to them growing, because I didn't implement some of the stuff that I should have earlier. And in return, like, not exaggerating, it's cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And,
Okay.
that's probably what I would do differently.
Okay. Well, maybe some experience with my seventh graders will help me out with that. That you don't set the expectations with those kids right up front. It's a zoo for the rest of the year. Those kids are bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
Um, I actually uh, listened, or I've listened to the tradesman experience, and talking about what they said with, hiring up front with saying, at the end of your probation period, I'm going to ask everyone in the shop what they think of you. And if my guys don't like you, you're gone, right? And my dad, he does collision work still, and they had some issues with employ or his boss had issues with some employees there, and they ended up getting rid of a couple. And my dad's I told him that, I said what I had heard on the tradesman experience, and he went in and told his boss. He said, I like that. So the next guy they brought in, they said, listen, at the end of your probation period, he said, I'm going to ask guys in the shop if they like you or how things are going, what they truly think, and if one of them doesn't like you, you're not staying. And he's like, it's changed, their shop culture quite a bit with just not having wasted people around,
Yeah.
not wasted as in intoxicated, you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
I do. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, Josh and Nate are awesome. They're
Hmm.
Josh is a killer when it comes to business, man. I love his
That's what
podcast
I
too.
I listen to your podcast, I listen to their podcast, and I listen to the EntreLeadership podcast,
Mhm.
and I've learned a ton from those three, and
Well, thank you.
I appreciate all three of them. It's been I mean seriously, when with the business side of things, I don't know what I don't know,
Mhm.
and being able to hear it from other people's experience has been extremely helpful for me. That's actually, while we were on vacation this past week, once the kids would go down, I've been working on my computer in some of the evenings and just filling out, the key result areas of what I'm looking for as I'm hiring, because I know it's going to get to a point where even once I get this guy on full time, we're then going to be swamped again, and then it's going to be time to look at getting another set of hands in there, and where do I want them to be able to go from there. So I've spent the last week going through KRAs and what each different job looks like, what each different job looks like in the shop, and where how I can delegate it myself from me doing everything to individuals. And until I started doing that, I had no like I now that I've done that, I look back, I'm like, I guarantee you what I would have done is just, hey, when they come in and you just work on this, and then it would be failed expectations where I would have expectations that they don't even know about, and
Mhm.
they would have expectations that they don't like I don't know about, right? And so there'd be a lot of confusion there. And I can see, like, when you what you were talking about, I can see how that's very easy to do with if you don't set it right up front. There's going to be a lot of confusion on your part and their part, a lot of frustration. And
Yeah.
that's something, just listening to those different podcasts that have been super helpful in hearing. You need to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you ever try to bring any other, ducks into the family, or into the business, and that's something I appreciate a lot, because I guarantee you I would do the exact same thing of, not setting standards and not setting expectations to where they need to be.
Yep, and it's easy to do. It really is. So, yeah, it's something that every business owner goes through whether they realize it or not. I just
Uh-huh.
and I wish I would've just realized it earlier.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's seriously why I love like podcasts like this, because learning from someone else's experience. I mean, there's also you learn by your own experience all the time, and so you learn some of the best lessons going through it yourself. But
Mhm.
being able to hear some of it ahead of time is a huge help.
Yep.
Um, you know, in keeping your sanity and trying to not waste a bunch of money and on expensive mistakes. But
Bunch of money.
yeah.
Speaking of money, tell me about your, some of the products that you make.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a huge list. That is one thing I've always been interested. Actually, it was in 2008 when the first Iron Man movie came out, and I thought for sure that's what I'm going to do for a living, is be Tony Stark, and that didn't work out. But I've always been interested in just like mm, coming up with solutions to problems. And I from a little kid, I've always liked building stuff or thinking I'm going to build stuff, and then then I end up with a pile of parts and toys that were taken apart, never put back together. But I have a long list I'm trying to go through. That anytime I have any free time in the shop, I work on a little bit of design on this, and then I just try to work through it until I can bring it to market. And I haven't had much of that time in the last 2 years because
Mhm.
of building the building and getting everything situated and trying to balance everything. But I'm really hoping to get back to that. But I've got a couple things. Actually, um, that concrete company that I used to work for, uh, most of their stuff was way too big for me to work on at my own place because I was in a two-car garage, and so I would work on it out of their shop. And they were 10 minutes away. And so I would always load up my grinders and everything and take them out there in my old Ford Ranger and unload at the shop and work out of there. And they had this huge old ESAB MIG welder with a Tweco gun on it that was like 18 inches long. And the lead on it was like, it felt like it was like a 2 inch diameter. It wasn't really, that's a huge exaggeration. But then I'd be welding like, you know, um, some 14 or 16 gauge, 60 thou wall tubing with it, and you got it was just a horrible situation. So I ended up getting a Millermatic 211 to take back and forth to be, semi-portable to be able to just use my own stuff. I didn't have to worry about if someone over there left the gas on and now it's out or anything like that, and or if it's out of wire. And so I ended up getting a Harbor Freight cart, like the dollies or the whatever they're called, the hand trucks,
Mhm.
and built a little mobile MIG welding cart. And I've sold those for probably 4 or 5 years. And so it's just a little kit that you can take that works for like a Millermatic 211 or some of the Vulcan welders or Lincoln welders. And that thing is awesome. Everyone always asks me if because now my welder's vertical and it's attached right to it.
Mhm.
My bottle goes on the front. It's got little tank straps for it that are all steel. And it all gets welded up. So I sell them as a kit, and then they assemble them. They just go out and get the dolly from Harbor Freight, and then they can slap their welder on it. And everyone always asks if it's going to hurt the welder running it vertically. And I actually called Miller before I did it and asked one of their techs, and they're like, "No, it's not a problem." Um, and it works great. So I made it so like the top tank strap comes to the back of your tailgate, and you
Yeah.
can pick it up from the axle on the back. It pivots up, you slide the whole thing in, and it was something easy that I could do on my own and it's got like a 125 tank in it, so it's not too bad. But you can hoist it in the back of your pickup and take it wherever you need to, and then it's got the big wheels. So if I need to drag it over
Nice.
gravel, it's not catching on a yeah.
It's funny that you say you mounted it vertical because we do, so we work with Lincoln, and we do some of their
Hmm.
a lot of their field trial stuff, and one funny thing I learned is that they orientate their boards vertically so
Oh,
that
really?
so that when they so that when dust eventually settles on everything, it's not
Uh-huh.
settling on a flat horizontal surface if you if you keep it in that orientation. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so because we've they send them to us because we don't purposely blow them up, but we don't do them any favors on the duty cycle, we'll put it that way. So,
Uh-huh.
we actually just had something blow up on us last week. It was an
Mhm.
inverter machine, and, it was just time for it to go, and they said that, well, they're gonna have to check in to see how they mounted the boards in there to make sure that no dirt actually sat on them and they're all in the right
Okay.
orientation the way that they designed
Yeah.
it. So,
Okay.
maybe if the I'm sure it doesn't affect the actual work like, the way it works, but you just might have to
Hmm.
blow it out a little bit more in case you mount it in a different orientation because
Oh,
I
that's
do
good to
know they
know.
think
Yeah.
about how they situate the boards in there so that the dust doesn't settle on them, so
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and I could see that for sure. Mine, it become any flat surface in a shop becomes a spot for either you to throw junk on or for dust to settle.
the workbench or
And
it's the
so
dust bench.
yeah, yeah. So with that little one that I use, Miller makes a little cover for their welder and it slides right over.
Mhm.
So the only time I have it exposed is when it's off, but I definitely could see that
It's funny.
being
I had a
that happening.
I had a Miller Mac 211 with a cover. I never freaking used it. I used it for probably 2 or 3 months when I first bought it just because, like, "Oh, it's cool, I'm gonna keep it nice," and then it came off and it never went back on.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
good for you for actually keeping it on there because I could never do it.
Oh, that one doesn't. That machine barely gets used. I honestly, I bought that for the jobs that I would do for that company, and I also thought it would be cool because I was saying I like off road, and guys are always breaking stuff up at the sand dunes, and all these guys that wrench on stuff in their on the weekends. That was really like the market I thought I would market it to. Was it's something you can easily pull into your enclosed trailer,
Mhm.
and it's got tie down points on it. You strap it right to the wall, and then it's guys that aren't using them 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
But I ended up using it a lot for that working at that concrete company. And I don't use unless I'm welding some really thin sheet metal, which now I have a laser welder, so I don't use it much even for that anymore. But I usually use the 252 in the shop, but it kind of just sits in the corner and uh, just sits there for the most part. But yeah,
So,
is what it is.
how old are you?
29.
So 29 working a full-time teacher job, you've cash flowed a laser cutting machine, a press brake, and a laser welder in your shop as a part-time gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. Good for you, man. Good for
Well, thanks. I
you.
appreciate it.
That, I mean, granted, you haven't taken any money out of the business, I get it. I
No,
s
I haven't made a
I
penny.
see why, I see why,
Yeah.
but good for you,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
That is cool. That's inspiring
Thanks.
for other guys who say that, should you finance or should you not, man? You are proof that you don't need to finance. Holy cow.
I think in going back to that, I know it's stunted my growth. I know I could grow a lot faster if I would. But I just, yeah, like I was saying, that's why it's taken me, since 2019 to do it because I didn't want to, finance it, which in reality, if I financed this all up front in 2019, I'm sure I'd be, further ahead, or I'd probably be divorced or dead or something. I don't know, but it's like it's a toss up, and I didn't want to risk that, but no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Tell me about your laser press brake,
Oh
tool.
yeah, yeah. So I came up with that. Do you know what Ultra 4 is?
I don't know. No, I don't know.
Like, have you ever watched any like the King of the Hammers races or
Oh,
Baja 1000 or
yes,
anything?
yes.
Okay, so Ultra 4 kind of came about several years ago, and it's kind of a mix between Jeeps and trophy trucks. Like it's just a cool blend. And there's a company, I don't even know how we got in contact with one another, but they asked me if I could make some fabricated axle housings for the GM 14 bolt and a Ford 9-inch rear ends. Those are both really popular in pre-runners or Ultra 4 or really any off-road vehicles. They're cheap to build for the most part. I mean, you can get crazy with them, but they're affordable. There's parts readily available, and those the stock axle housings are everywhere. And so this company asked me if I could make these fabricated axle housings for them. It was their design. It's a company it's Gearhead Fabworks. The guy does I've done a lot of different pre-runner parts over the years, and the designs that he's come up with are really, really, I mean, top notch. But I did that the first one probably 3 or 4 years ago. We did a set of axle housings, and when you use a press brake, you've got at least if you have a CNC back gauge, or even if you have a manual back gauge, a lot of times you'll have like two fingers that come out that you bump your material up against, and then you'll set your back gauge for 2 inches or whatever distance from the parallel side to where your bend line is. You'll set that distance in your controller or manually, whatever. You bump your material up against it, and now you have a reference point. So when your press brake comes down and bends it, you can control how long that flange is. That works great for 95% of things that you do. You've got most of your bend lines are going to be parallel to an edge. You try to design things that way, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you need to bump bend, which is basically you're taking a bunch of small bends to make up a larger radius rather than just making a 90 degree and making your inside radius is dependent on depends if you're bending steel or stainless, you're just doing mild steel or stainless, it's going to depend on the width of that lower die.
Mhm.
Is going to determine That's going to be the biggest determining factor in your inside bend radius. Um, with aluminum, you're looking more at the punch tip radius is going to be more of the determining factor there. And there are exceptions to all of this, but um, when you're bump bending, a lot of times too, you can't you'll if you're bump bending something that ends up coming straight up on the edges, if it's doing 180 degrees, you can work from the inside out, or sorry, from the middle out, and you'll get to a point where that sheet metal is going to want to bend back around and hit your beam on your press brake, and it's going to
Mhm.
hit your machine, and then it's going to back bend and make a mess.
Yeah.
And so sometimes with that, you'll have to do a rehit in the middle or on a couple of on a couple of the bends. And so you might have 30 bends. You might hit this part 30 times to make this specific radius. Um, and you'll have to come back and hit the ones that are in the middle to tighten them up at the very end. Because if you waited to hit, if this was your last bend, the rest of your parts orientate or like oriented
Oh,
this way, so it's going to hit your
yes.
machine. So being able to line that up, you're holding it on your die and you're trying to line it up as your machine is moving, right? And so
Mhm.
it can be kind of difficult to do that. So um, that's one instance where you'd use that laser, and I'll explain how that works in a second. But the reason I came up with this the first time was for that fabricated axle housing. If you look at those axle housings, they go from a lot of times a 4-inch axle tube to a now you got to support a 10-inch center or a 9-inch center, and so it's they're kind of come out almost as a cone, right? Smaller diameter, larger, boxed in um, around that center section. And so your bend lines are no longer parallel to any edges. So you've got to be able to the old way is either taking a scribe and scribing from point to point, or chalk or whatever, soapstone, and marking those out, and then you're lining it up with the punch as it hits it. That's fine. It worked. I mean, people have been doing it forever that way. And there's some other tricks, kind of like if you've ever used a saw with like a shadow line. They'll try to do some of that um, with your press brake sometimes too. Um, but I ended up coming up with this idea to make a laser line that shoots across. And there's some manufacturers that have lasers that go across, but I wanted to make one that fit my machine, that I could set right in the tool holder so it's always lined up. And so my first prototype was using literally my laser level, and then I 3D printed an adapter to fit in the European style tooling, and then I just used like a jack screw to move it back and forth to get it lined up. But my laser level, it worked okay for like 5 minutes until my laser would get too warm and that beam would, get really wide.
Mm.
I'm sure expensive laser levels do much better than a cheap one off Amazon, um, but that beam would get wide and then it was almost unusable. And so I ended up designing this, and basically all the laser housings are the same, and then they have different adapters. I said earlier there's European style tooling, American style tooling, and wheelless style tooling. So basically there's two machine screws in each one of these that you can pop out and swap it over to a different type of adapter. And so all the housings are the same, and you can slap those in your machine. But then there's a problem if you want, so it's taking up space where your punch would go.
Yeah.
Usually when you're bump bending, you're not doing it full width of a machine anyways, at least in my case. So it's not that big of a deal. But then, some people want to be able to do that full length. So I made a magnetic adapter. So you can pop those two machine screws out, put the magnetic adapter on, slap it on the side of your tooling all the way off the end. And now you can use the, entire width. The magnetic adapter and the tooling adapters, they all have their place. But yeah, it just is, you swap it out per job basically. If you want to use it on, if you're going full length, use the magnetic
Mhm.
adapter, or it all depends. There's a lot of different setups you can do with each of them. But
Yeah,
so I made that,
that's
and
awesome.
um, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I don't use it honestly. I don't use it all that often, but when you need it, it's a lifesaver.
Well, it's funny
Uh,
because I've always talked about doing that to ours. So we have an old Verson press brake, and
oh
it's
yeah,
the old flywheel. Our back gauge is
yeah,
like so our back gauge is a plywood setup with a little piece of
okay,
sheet metal on it and a set screw. And
oh yeah,
like I got it from a guy I knew, and it was just it's janky. It really is. And it would be so helpful just to have a laser just to line, because like we don't we do set the back gauge for probably about half the stuff we do. But so
uh-huh,
sometimes it's just like, we're making 2 brackets, just line it, like measure it, put a line on it, line it up and bend it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So to have a laser like that, and it's funny because I saw this laser that you made a while ago, and I'm like, I love it. I need to buy one. And then I lost it forever. Like it was in the Instagram abyss. And then when, like we've been talking for a while, but, and I've been following your stuff, but I never really, like, dug deep into your stuff until we booked, and I was like and then I went through, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the laser thing I've been looking for, like, 2 years." I'm like, "This thing's awesome." I'm like, "I'm totally gonna buy one of these." And then,
I'll send you one when I get home.
dude, totally, man. I will yeah,
Yeah, that
uh,
was actually when you say that about the Versum. That So when I first made it, I didn't even think about any of the older press brakes that like, but that I've had a ton of guys that have bought them because they either don't have a back gauge or their back gauge doesn't work, and they do the
mhm,
same thing. They'll just plasma cut. And when I had my homemade press brake, I would just plasma cut little notches, just a tiny little notch on each side, so I knew where that bend line was at, right?
yeah,
And that's how I would go off of it, trying to line it up that way. And I've had a ton of guys that have done the exact same thing, and they use that as a reference point, and they'll slap that on the side of their die or in their tool holder, and they'll do the same thing. They'll plasma cut a little notch out of each end, and then just line it up. Laser on this side with this notch, laser on that side with that notch, and that's how they do that.
yeah.
But yeah, I'll send you one. It's funny you say that. Or bring that up. I have sold more of those in the last week and a half that I've been on vacation than I've sold in the last month and a half. I've gotten, I don't know if someone put it on, like, I always get a huge order, like, or a bunch of orders coming in anytime someone puts it up on social media or like does a review of it or whatever.
Yeah.
I always get a bunch, like a batch of orders right after that. And this last time around, I've gotten a ton of orders for those in the last 10 days, but I can't find anything that someone's put online. So I don't know if there's, actually had a guy call me the other day and ask me a question about one of them. And he called my business phone, which is at home. And my sister, I had her go to my house and pick it up. So she tells me every day when someone, if someone calls and leaves a message. So I ended up calling him back on my personal phone. But I said, "Where did you find this?" And he said, "Oh, just in Reels." I was like, "I." So did someone do like a review? He said, "No, it was just someone using one." I'm like, "Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's all." I figured someone had put something up, but I don't know. I haven't found it.
I think it has come up recently in on my reels too, because or maybe it's just because I was looking at your stuff and it thought that I wanted to see if you did a reel on it. I don't know how it
uh,
came about, but how where does everybody find this amazing laser press brake?
it's on my website, trinityfabworks.com.
Awesome. Very
Yeah,
cool, man.
yeah.
Well, is there anything else you've got for me, man?
Um,
Anything else that you want to cover that I didn't cover yet?
Not that I can think of.
Awesome. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I really
No, I appreciate you
appreciate
having me on.
yeah, I appreciate you coming on, taking the time. I think a lot of guys are gonna, really like to hear your story about how you're still full-time employed, well, part-time employed, and still running your fab shop full-time on the side. So
Yeah, it's hopefully that's not the story for too much longer. Counting down the
couple
days.
more months, man.
Yeah, my wife actually made me or she made my 3-year-old a little countdown to when we were gonna fly out to go to Florida. And it's got like a little plane on it, and he'd every morning he'd get up and he'd move it. And I said, when we get back from Florida, I need you to make me one of those from to full-time self-employment. I want to move the little sticker over.
Yeah, yeah, each
But
day.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Cody, I appreciate you taking the time, man, and, we'll catch up again soon. I hope you enjoy your vacation.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.